2v2 on Semoskiy. This game is going to be Patrickzwang and Wanderer versus Lifer and Ozena, and we've got mixed axis versus mixed allies. And we've already got a pretty ballsy pick. Soviet Reserve Army from Lifer, which you almost never see in any mode, but apparently we're going to see it this game. So, I guess we're going to see some irregulars this game. And as usual on Semoskiy, we're going to see an early engagement for the central village. Conscripts and riflemen setting up in green cover to engage against Volksgrenadiers setting up in these buildings. As far as commanders, Ozena has infantry, airborne, and recon support. Patrickzwang has Jaeger armor, close air support, and spearhead. Wanderer has spec ops, scavenge, and breakthrough. So I'm not honestly sure what the Axis are thinking as far as commanders. Infiltration grenades seem quite likely from the OKW, which will help a lot against the buildings. Already a squad of infantry has been wiped here in the building, unfortunately, to a pretty good Molotov. And it looks like they're going to struggle to hold this line, but a battle group headquarters is being constructed here in the back, which will allow Axis forces to reinforce and heal. And another squad just got wiped. Axis, what are you guys doing? Pay attention. Just walked right up into short range with those grenadiers and got blasted by riflemen. Not off to a great start. Stern Pioneers are already dead. MG-42's taking a Molotov at short range. But the battle group headquarters did complete narrowly. It was actually already taking damage, and if those allies had spotted it even 5 seconds earlier, I think it may have been taken out. Another squad getting caught well out of position, and the massive blob of allied infantry is just going to gun it down. Everything is dying. Everything the Axis has is dying horribly. Rear echelon troops are harassing the entire north, and we'll get that munitions income going soon. And a combat engineering squad is being sent towards the south to get that munitions point. These wounded riflemen are being sent to do some capturing of their own, and it does mean that the Axis will have a little bit of a window with which to try and take up a defensive position in the center and try to hold it. But their early losses mean that they are off to a horrible, horrible start. I guess if there's a game in which you can try to make irregulars work, it's one in which you've already wiped like 5 Axis squads within 4 minutes of the game beginning, and they're going to be deployed to the central village now. For those of you that aren't all that familiar with irregulars, come at 1 command point, cost 190 manpower, and have access to a 45 munitions grenade, which is crazy expensive. AT grenades, once you research them, and some third ability that I couldn't read because I got inside of this building.
But only for those who are seriously wounded.
I think it's a demo charge? I don't know. I can't remember. Or mines? Maybe they can plant mines.
We need to start us a rumor like they did back in Normandy. Remember? The guys who said the water was bad?
Replacements have arrived!
It's cleared up? Yeah. We need to start us a rumor.
Riflemen have harassed the fuel point here, and will be chased away by a squad of grenadiers, and meanwhile the strategic points in the south area are going to get taken by Volksgrenadiers and grenadiers alike. American player has gone in for lieutenant, followed up by an ambulance, and no light vehicle purchase from him yet. He does have the fuel for an AA half-track, but he still has a little bit of manpower to accumulate before he can field that. And Volksgrenadiers harassing the north victory point should easily be able to force away that rear echelon troop squad as well. Now that the Allies have had a chance to collect themselves, retreat reinforce and heal, we're going to see their next big push towards the center of the map. Available to defend is one machine gun, a mortar, and a smattering of infantry squads, which seem to be getting rounded up from the various flanks of the map and being forced to go deal with counter-harassment duties and cannot effectively defend the center. The machine gun in the central church has already been burned out by a Molotov, but it doesn't look like the Soviet player is getting too aggressive, despite having a pretty good window of opportunity right now. A fresh Stern Pioneer squad has been fielded and equipped with a support package so that it can repair the battlefield headquarters. Soviet forces in the church will be forced to retreat after taking heavy damage from the mortar. Since the American player is not available to support in this engagement, the Soviet player is not able to push forward aggressively and engage, and it looks like most American squads are tied up with harassment duties in the south, which means the Soviet player is content to simply hold the line here in the graveyard, while his American teammate continues to take his opponent's territory on other areas of the map. It looks like a Tier 4 structure is going to be purchased here on the Axis munitions cutoff. Once that structure completes, while it will be in a vulnerable position, it will protect the Axis munitions income at least for a while. But of course it will be important that it is able to build without being spotted by any Allied infantry. American infantry on the fuel point is forced to retreat by counter-harassment from grenadiers. Looks like they fired a rifle grenade to help turn the engagement, and these two squads, rather than continuing to push the Axis fuel, will make their way towards the graveyard to assist the Soviet forces in trying to overwhelm this Axis position. An American anti-air half-track has been deployed to the center to assist in engagements as well. There's not really any anti-tank in the area available to help push that half-track away, which means that these infantry, which are getting suppressed, have no defense against that half-track and will be forced to retreat. Forward retreat point has not been unlocked yet, which means every time a squad retreats from the center, it goes all the way back to base. Grenades have been teched by the American player too, and wipe a machine gun and nearly wipe a grenadier squad here in the center. The Axis continue to engage very poorly against their opponents, but despite this have secured excellent map control as the Allies have clustered all of their forces in the center for a big push.
Aufgepasst. Fallback position upgrade ready. Capture complete. No enemy activity.
Fuel cache going up on the Allied cutoff here to help bolster the Allied economy, which definitely won't hurt since they've lost so much map control just to harassment, unopposed harassment. The Tier 4 structure has also been constructed outside of Allied view and will be able to defend the munitions cutoff. Pretty risky move by the Axis, considering the PPSH squad of conscripts was available just around the corner, but fortunately for them, he never bothered to go check for the Tier 4 structure. Half-track is engaging here in the center, trying to lay fire on the various infantry formations that are moving their way up into the graveyard. Irregulars positioned in cover with mortar support are bleeding the Volksgrenadiers as they advance, and the AA half-track itself deals healthy damage and will force more retreats. After taking one Panzertrack shot, it will pull back for repairs.
Under fire!
Still no commander selections, by the way, from anybody other than Lifer, who is making extensive use of his irregulars and PPSH upgrade, but other than that, we don't really see a whole lot of doctrinal features by anybody, despite it being 4 or 5 command points into the game. 11 minutes is about to be hit. We're probably going to start seeing more high-tech Allied units. In fact, we're going to see an Su-76 hit the field. After a mechanized armor campaign has been purchased from the American player, we still have no major, although he's in progress, and once he completes, we'll probably start seeing some Tier 4 American vehicles. We don't see any commander selections from the American player yet, though, and he does have some late game options here. The only thing that I think he probably should have picked earlier, if he was going to pick it, is Recon, because the impact that the Greyhound can have has a rather short window of opportunity, and that window has largely closed. So I think that Airborne or Infantry is more likely. Airborne if he wants access to the P-47, and Paratroopers, and of course Infantry if he wants access to the Priest. And on-target artillery, both of which would be useful for breaking through these Axis defensive positions. Panzer II bumps straight into this Su-76, but unfortunately it doesn't seem that Leifer has access to anti-tank grenades, but they are being researched now. If he had had access to them, that Panzer II would most likely be dead. The Su-76 doesn't counter a lot of things effectively, but it does counter the Panzer II.
AT grenades now available to all conscripts. The sector is at risk.
Allied infantry formations are trying to make their way out of the base, back to the front lines, but they're about to run straight into this Panzer II, and the Su-76 is backed off a little bit too far to be able to support. Fortunately, Allied infantry poses enough of a threat to force that Panzer II to reposition to a slightly more safe location, but regardless, this rifleman squad manages to get close enough for an anti-tank rifle grenade. They immediately retreat and will make it away safely. And that Panzer II will probably be destroyed if anything hits it. The Su-76 can't quite get in range to get a good shot off and would have to bombard it with a long-range barrage, which is still on cooldown, and a more important target is this building, which they need to force this flamethrower squad out of if they're going to be able to continue pushing out of their base. Feeling rather contained on this bridge, they have to secure this position if they're going to be able to make pushes back into the central village. Su-76 will be able to bombard across the building with its barrage, and it's doing so now, and a field gun is actually moving up to do the same. Meanwhile, Allied infantry is trying to round the corner, and they should be able to do so safely since there are no machine guns available in the area to support, and the artillery support has softened up the formations enough that they're being forced to reposition to a more advantageous location. During the course of these engagements, the Allies have been harassing territory all over the map, including the fuel right outside the Axis base, while rear echelon troops take control of the cutoff here, and riflemen take control of the munitions in the north. Effectively trying to skirt this Tier 4 structure for now, and just take territory that they can deal with without having to engage that thing directly.
Taking effective fire! Cover!
Lieutenant makes his way into the central victory point. And a field gun and the Su-76 have moved up to fire on the various units in the area. Su-76 barrage is about to come off cooldown, and I'm wondering if we're going to see a Katyusha next. He has the fuel for any of these units, but he hasn't purchased them yet. Meanwhile, the American player is purchasing his first Sherman now. It's slightly delayed to the 15-minute mark because of his initial purchase of the anti-air half-track, and as a result, that Panzer II has had a much longer lifetime, and is doing a pretty good job of harassment and counter-harassment in the center and north.
Mission accomplished.
That's something you're going to have to take into account when you purchase that anti-air half-track, is that you're delaying your own anti-tank capabilities. And we're actually going to see the late pick of Recon support, and he didn't pick it for the Greyhound, but instead for the INR Pathfinders. So he's planning on utilizing their artillery, and I guess he felt that the Pathfinder artillery would be a more worthwhile investment than time on target artillery from the infantry company. And I'm not entirely sure I agree, because while the Pathfinder artillery is definitely, undeniably better, having access to the priest on this map is extremely valuable. And he has denied himself access to that, and instead his late game options are going to be the airdropped combat group and of course just the standard tier 4 vehicles. And while I think he probably can make those work, it's just a shame that he didn't pick recon support earlier and take full advantage of everything the commander had to offer.
They got a Panzerschreck! Reinforced and ready to go. Enemy armor is chewing us up! Enemy armor!
Panzer II moves up to counter-harass here in the south. The AA half-track actually poses a significant threat to it and forces it to reposition.
Green as green can be.
I wonder if being Vet 2 helped. I don't actually know the Vet bonuses for that half-track, but it almost won that engagement. It did win that engagement, but it almost destroyed the tank completely, which is more than I was expecting it to be able to do.
A capture point. Enemy infantry, they're firing! Swing guns around!
INR Pathfinders being deployed here, setting up a beacon. And I guess that will allow his airdrop combat group squads to reinforce, and it also reveals enemy squads on the minimap. I've never really found the beacons to be all that useful personally. I never even bothered with them, but I guess they don't hurt, they are free. AA half-track here, harassing the fuel, is finally forced away by a lot of counter-harassment. 3 squads making their way across the points to try and get all of that cleared out, and an AT gun is fielded over there as well. Pathfinders drop their very first artillery burst, but it's just on some infantry squads, which easily dodge it. Seems like that was kind of a waste of Pathfinder artillery there. And we still have no forward retreat point here, since the Major is being utilized to capture territory. And he's dead. Another risk, utilizing the Major to cap. Other than not having a forward retreat point. And we just don't see a coordinated push by the Allies to do something about the this defensive position. Despite fielding all the right units, they haven't been aggressive enough. Su-76 has yet... Whoa. Was that the Su-76? No, that was an ML-20. ML-20 is on the field now from Lifer, and its very first barrage netted at 10 kills. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier with the Priest. Having access to the Priest would similarly help break up these Axis defensive formations and bleed their manpower hard. The ML-20, of course, will accomplish the same thing, so it's good that they have some access to on-map artillery. If they can do similar strikes with the Pathfinders, then they should definitely be well on their way to knocking the Axis off the map. At the same time, now that Tigers are arriving on the battlefield, it's important that they utilize the Axis utilize these heavy tanks to break through and take out priority targets like that ML-20 if at all possible. It's very difficult to do so on Semoskiy, which is why you need to have an effect with those heavy tanks as early as you possibly can. Oversold squad's taking control of the victory point here in the north. Panzer II chasing a squad of riflemen off that was trying to get some harassment done. Pretty good victory point management by the Allies. They've already secured themselves a 150-point lead, but on Semoskiy that's almost to be expected. Now that the Tiger has arrived, the more balanced part of the game will really begin. Since the Tiger performs quite well in these urban areas, and it'll be the Allies that struggle to find an effective counter to that. We do have access to one field gun. The Su-76 can do minor damage to the Tiger when it actually manages to penetrate. But really, they're going to need a Jackson, or just a huge quantity of Shermans, to effectively combat that Tiger. Panzer II getting a little too brave here and does get taken out by the Su-76. Not sure why it was diving so deep against these massed anti-tank weapons, but that will be the end of that Panzer II's reign of terror. Tiger, on the other hand, is doing just fine and continues to force retreats from U.S. infantry, and since the Major is dead, there's no forward retreat point to allow them to counterattack a little bit more quickly when they are forced off the battlefield. Regardless, it's pointless to send them into the meat grinder without some proper anti-tank backing them up, and American player is probably going to want to bring Jackson to his next engagement, and he will have the fuel to do so within the next minute or so. Until he can afford that, he's going to have to engage as well as he possibly can using his Shermans instead. And by focusing on the flanks of the map, he should be able to do that. The Tier 4 structure here continues to be in a pretty vulnerable and undefended location. Should the Shermans manage to force a retreat from various Axis infantry here in the north, Allied tanks could definitely punch through and destroy that structure, especially since Wanderer has chosen to go with a Stuka before any other high-tech purchase. And since he has purchased Mechanized Regiment headquarters after his Tier 4 structure, it makes me wonder if he's going to go from Stuka straight into a King Tiger. They have such good map control that I think that's definitely a realistic goal. He's got 22 fuel coming in. He'll have the fuel for a King Tiger in the next 10 minutes. Since his opponent is utilizing Shermans primarily, and there is a Tiger to bridge the gap here in the center of the map, King Tiger would be a pretty realistic next purchase, especially if he decides to activate fuel transfer at some point, which he could probably afford, having 185 munitions in the bank. Volksgrenadier Blob making its way to the front lines, is forced to retreat and takes heavy damage, gets gunned down on retreat, loses one of the two squads. Pretty good engagement by these Shermans with high explosive rounds to take out infantry without losing anything in return. The Stuka that's been purchased is firing on these Soviet squads. And the Soviet player will retreat preemptively. He was assuming, I think, that the Soviet player was already making his way towards this choke point, and as a result, the barrage was slightly off target. Nice harassment of the fuel by the American player throughout the entire course of this game. This fuel point is constantly contested. They do manage to get it captured just barely in time, and will retreat to safety. Grenadiers make their way forward to take control of that fuel point back. Meanwhile, big push by the Axis for the Allied cutoff here while they were busy dealing with push in this area. An anti-tank gun and some Grenadiers make their way forward to try to secure control of the cutoff. Howitzer bombarding the area will clear out the anti-tank gun and possibly destroy it completely.
The capture point is being overrun. An infantry unit.
Harassing squad of rear echelon troops will be forced to retreat, or will be gunned down by the Tiger on retreat before making it back to base. Anti-tank grenades are being thrown by irregulars here. Do not quite penetrate. And a huge force of Allied infantry is trying to make its way out of the base.
Enemy forces are attempting to capture our territory.
Jackson makes its way to the front lines and gets one shot off on that Tiger before being destroyed by fragmentation bombs and a shot from another Tiger here in the south. But an Su-85 across the river is pounding that Tiger at range, and if it doesn't get to safety, it could get taken out. It needs to pull back to a more safe location, but a Stuka barrage on the cutoff inflicts huge damage, wiping out the AT gun crew and almost killing this rifle squad along with it. American player getting very aggressive here with this Sherman, but it's a suicidal play. There's no hope of him catching up and destroying that Tiger. He tries to take the Stuka out instead, only gets one shot off unfortunately before kind of disengaging a little bit. When you go all in with tanks, you can't really pull out halfway through. You've pretty much committed to a big engagement. And it looks like the American player has realized that. Now that that Sherman has been destroyed, he's going to continue his push with the second, and he will catch the Stuka. It didn't continue backing to a more safe location, trying to round this corner. He may or may not be able to keep it alive, but it's going to be difficult. He's got to take full advantage of vision blockers here, and the Sherman will be destroyed by supporting anti-tank weapons in the area. The Stuka survives, thanks to some pretty unfortunate pathing by that Sherman, in fact. Meanwhile, various Soviet units try to contend with the freshly repaired Tiger here in the south. It doesn't look like it's going very well. Su-85 brought down to half health, and all shots are bouncing off the Tiger's frontal armor. One shot penetrates, but Pioneers are available to repair that immediately. There is an Axis anti-tank gun here available for them to steal, however, to give them some level of respite from these Axis heavy tanks, which they are utterly failing to bring down. 2 Tigers on the field now, and after engaging with them extremely poorly, they've been vetted up, and the Axis have lost very little in comparison to their opponents in these engagements. The American player in particular is looking very weak, having lost all of his armor, including his Jackson that he drove straight into the maw of the enemy. With not much support, he really needed to keep that behind enemy lines. Lifer doing a pretty good job with his Su-85 and Su-76. Every vehicle that Lifer has produced is still alive, but he hasn't produced that many. He still has 283 fuel in the bank, and at a bit of a manpower deficit because of his howitzer, which is also performing quite well. 17 kills and will be vet too soon. But he needs to keep the vehicle production going, or they're going to get overwhelmed by these Tigers. That being said, having a lot of trouble contending with Tigers now that there are no Soviet call-in units available to him. They don't have IS-2s or T-3485s or anything like that. He's going to be forced to contend with the full might of the Axis army, utilizing only Soviet core units, and we all know how difficult that can be. Molotov going off in the center here. Does force a retreat from one squad. The engagement looks like it's not going that well for either side, really. It's been highly lethal. This Tiger, however, is in a lot of danger. Smoke being deployed over here to screen the advance of any supporting armor while they continue the chase of this Tiger. Su-85 shots all penetrating, and there are 2 AT guns moving up to support. Pack getting some good hits off as well. American AT gun in the area is firing. Su-85 firing, but it is the stolen German anti-tank gun that gets the killing blow, and the Tiger is destroyed. Finally, the Allies have a small victory, but will it be enough to come back from this situation? They have lost almost literally the entire map. A howitzer is bombarding this area to try and give the Allies some room to breathe. Tiger will hit vet 1 as it takes out infantry trying to round the corner here. And the Stuka is going to fire once again. The Stuka has honestly not performed all that well, but now that it has lots of anti-tank weaponry to fire on, it should start racking up kills. A nice dodge by the Allies there, since it was firing not during an engagement, but after one. The Allies had plenty of room to maneuver out of harm's way. Su-76 one-shots a squad as it rounds the corner, and it's up to vet 3, 15 kills. Performing pretty okay, doing Red Wings proud. A few Allied squads have managed to break the containment and start taking some territory back. One squad is taking a very wide route past all strategic points and making a play straight for the VP, while the conscripts here in the south are going to take control of the victory point there. Fragmentation bombs dropped on an AT gun will clear it but not destroy it, and allied squads are making their way back into the center to try to make a push for the central village. The defenses there are relatively light, one AT gun and some supporting infantry, while the Tiger and Command Panther have been pulled back for repairs. The Stuka also has several seconds left before it will be able to fire again, which means the allies have a small window of opportunity where they can try and make a meaningful push. The INR Pathfinders are leading the charge to give vision and potentially take out priority targets with their artillery, dropping it slightly behind this pack in case it decides to reposition, but it looks like he wasn't paying attention to the engagement, and the pack will be defrued if not completely destroyed. Meanwhile, the paratroopers taking control of the victory point in the north will get pushed away by Obersoldaten, Volksgrenadiers, and Grenadiers. They do get the clock ticking against the axis again, though, and their prioritization of victory points is paying off. Since they're already 150 points behind, it's very important that they prioritize that over all other points, and as a result they've gotten the clock ticking against their opponents once again, trying to apply pressure and alleviate the pressure on their cutoff in the central village. Stuka is firing on forces in the back, but unfortunately the barrage is slightly off target once again. As allied anti-tank weaponry makes its way towards the front lines, they should be able to apply pressure to the Tiger. It takes health down to about half, and it will round a corner for further repairs. The ML-20 will be available to fire again soon, and the high concentration of Axis forces around the battle group headquarters makes it a highly vulnerable defensive position. Su-76 barrage going off gets a nice initial hit on those Grenadiers and forces a retreat from that squad. INR Pathfinder standing in the capture circle will delay the victory point capture by the Axis for a little while, but they're getting focused down quickly. Paratroopers with bazookas have been deployed here as well. Because they landed with bazookas, they're not a very effective anti-infantry counter, but they do have grenades, and they managed to wipe the Volksgrenadier squad. Very nice grenade from that paratrooper squad. Their bazookas will serve as a small deterrent against this Panther advancing past them, since bazookas will reliably penetrate the Panther's rear armor. They won't do meaningful damage to the frontal armor of either of these tanks, and when they hear the Stuka barrage coming, they will immediately retreat. Because the Major has not been purchased by the American player again since initially losing it, he does not have a forward retreat point and constantly has to retreat all the way back to his base. Finally, another tank arrives from Ozena, and he will field a Jackson straight towards the middle, but until it gets there to support, a field gun, heavily damaged field gun, and a Vedeta Su-85 are the only defense the Soviet player has against advancing Axis armor.
The enemy is overrunning one of our
Tiger had a window of opportunity with which to kill that Su-76 since its pathing is currently blocked by the field gun here. In fact, this is one of the worst traffic jam spots in the game. Happens pretty much every game on Semoskiy that allied vehicles just cannot make it to the front lines because of the bridges on this map. Almost another squad wipe here, but the Grenadier squad will retreat just barely in time. Su-76 will need to pull back for repairs as it's taking heavy damage.
We're getting plastered over here! Damn it! Keep your weight up!
Soviet player definitely does have some float issues, but he's mostly pop caps. All of the pop cap he has freed up is mostly from him reinforcing. He has to lose some of his units to be able to purchase more. ML-20 is bombarding the center of victory point to try and soften up infantry formations, but there isn't really anything in the area. Jackson is taking shots at some tanks where it has an opportunity to do so, netting itself a little bit of veterancy. It's taken light damage, but well on its way to Vet 1, and once it has armor-piercing rounds, it will be a much more effective weapon against these heavy Axis tanks. There's two Tigers on the field that allies need to chew through, and supported by a Command Panther, they're even more powerful than they normally are. And there's a Stuka, up to 24 kills as well, that the allies would probably love to take out, but their means to do so is somewhat limited. Allies are going to make a push for victory points once again, remaining ever cognizant of the clock. 130 points remaining for the Allies. Conscripts are going to make a push for the center VP now. Things are rather quiet while tanks get repaired on both sides. Jackson has been fully repaired and is making its way back to the front line with field gun and Su-85 support. Paratroopers are being deployed to assist and try and take control of the center victory point. Axis counterattack is inevitable. We'll be arriving to re-secure control of the central village as soon as the tanks have been repaired and are available to do so. Stuka Barrage is also off cooldown and will probably be fired during the course of the next engagement, which is going to pose a significant threat to Allied team weapons, and the Allies will need to be mindful of the Stuka and keep their infantry formation spread out so that they don't get wiped as they try and maintain control of the central area. Su-85 is moving up to fire on these Tigers at range, making good use of the long-range potential of this particular area. Stuka Barrage is fired a little early, does only minor damage to an AT gun, but brings the Su-85 low enough that its force to pull completely back. ML-20 bombarding this area just wiped a squad by the Tiger and gets two huge hits on that Tiger. It needs to path out of this area, but it's rotating so slowly. Fortunately, ML-20's third shot is a little off target, but what is it doing? ML-20 barrage comes to an end, fortunately. That Tiger pulls back with just a tiny amount of HP remaining. That was one of the best ML-20 barrages against the Tiger I think I've ever seen, netting at Vet 3, and it's up to 34 kills now as well. Now that the battle group headquarters position has been softened up so much by artillery, these paratroopers with bazookas are free to move up and start firing on it, but they actually find the Stuka in an even worse position. Two bazookas do connect with it, but because they get a little too close to the Schwer Panzer headquarters, they will be forced to retreat once getting suppressed. The Command Panther moves up to try and take a shot at this Su-76, but will be screened away by the Su-85 and field gun available to support it. Pathfinder artillery is going to get dropped on the battle group headquarters, but I don't believe it's low enough to be destroyed. And by Pathfinder artillery, I guess I mean fake smoke. Nothing happened, and the Pathfinders died. ML-20 is bombarding the structure, however, and bringing it down to about half.
Crowds are sniffing around our asses. Tactical point being captured.
And killing the medics, just for good measure. Stern Pioneers have repaired one of the Tigers. Stuka's next in line, followed by the Vet 2 Tiger. Once all of these forces have been fully repaired, they'll make their way back towards the center to try and make something happen to take out priority targets. Starting with this Su-76, which gets gibbed by Panzerschreck troops, supported by the Command Panther. The repaired Tiger is making its way to the front line to assist, but the Jackson field gun and Su-85 were more than enough to destroy that Command Panther. A second Jackson has arrived to support here, and the American player traps the Su-85. He wouldn't let him path to safety, and that Su-85 was doing such good work this game. It's such a shame to see that go down. I hope these Jacksons plan to make something happen against that Tiger, otherwise that Su-85 was murdered for no reason. Oh no. That Jackson driver must be feeling pretty guilty right now. Paratroopers desperately attempting to take the center victory point will get wiped out by the Stuka. That's just another squad right down the drain. Conscripts, however, are harassing the victory point there in the north, and the south is still firmly in Allied hands. Only small harassment forces being sent by the Ostheer towards the south to try and get some of that territory under control, and every attempt largely fails. These two Jacksons will serve as an effective deterrent against armored pushes by the Axis, but neither of these Tigers has been destroyed yet. That situation looks like it might change, though. Su-85 and two Jacksons going hard on this Tiger. Armor-piercing rounds being thrown out as well. The American player does not utilize attack ground, unfortunately. The Soviet player does, but the Tiger's already gotten to safety. And the Tiger will pull back for further repairs. The Allies not committing to a big push. They are moving up slightly to try and apply pressure, and if they can get some lucky long shots, it might be possible to destroy one of these tanks. Smoke is making it very difficult, unfortunately. Obersoldaten making their way to the front line, just gun down a full conscript squad with ease, but they can't get too close to these PPSH conscripts without risking getting wiped. The heavily damaged Tiger has pulled back to safety and awaits repairs from Sturm Pioneers. The Vet 2 Tiger is available on this road to support should any Allied tanks get too aggressive, but at the same time it doesn't look like there's anything the Axis can do about this battle group headquarters, which is about to be destroyed, and the ML-20 is firing somewhere in this area as well. Dangerously close to where this Tiger is repairing. I'm not sure exactly where that barrage was aimed. Apparently more towards this area, so. Or it's just landing randomly all over the place. Doesn't look like any of the shots are going to connect with these repairing squads, and the Tigers will get fully repaired. For all the mistakes the U.S. Forces player may have made this game, we definitely have to point out how great his harassment has been. This fuel point is just never in Axis hands for more than a few minutes. He's constantly down here taking control of this fuel and punishing the fact that the Axis have not set up proper defenses or barricades to prevent Allied forces from making their way across the bridge and taking that fuel point. Same goes for the points up here, and victory point control is now absolute in favor of the Allies, despite having fallen behind initially. The clock is going to start ticking against the Germans once again. 110 points now remaining for Germany, and 3 victory points in Allied hands. Su-85s and Jacksons firing on this Tiger. This one's trying to move up to screen, but without pushing with these 2 Tigers simultaneously, it doesn't look like the engagement is going very well. They really need some sort of infantry-based counter to these tanks, like Volksgrenadiers or Panzer Grenadiers with Shreks or AT guns, or even Raketenwerfers, anything but more Tigers. They need to spend some manpower on AT guns, or they're just going to get outproduced, especially if they continue to engage with 1 tank at a time. This Jackson's getting a little over-aggressive, but I'm not sure it's even going to matter. That Tiger looks like it's going to go down any second. There it goes. King Tiger has hit the field, but even that probably is going to struggle. Look at all of this massed anti-tank weaponry. 2 Su-85s, 2 Jacksons, 3 anti-tank guns. The Axis are absolutely lacking in their own anti-tank firepower, and this King Tiger's already going to be destroyed. There it goes. Allies making great use of their long-range tanks, and these Axis tanks could not have done this engagement worse. 2 Tigers down, King Tiger down, GG being called. Wanderer and Patrickzwang have surrendered, and the Allies win. I think lack of anti-tank weaponry is really what lost it for the Axis here. But it's amazing that the Allies were able to come back from this situation, especially considering one of them went with Soviet Reserve Army. Somehow they managed to pull through. Great use of Su-85s. We saw a Vet 3 Su-85 and 2 Vet 2 Su-85s. Plus we got to see a Vet 3 Su-76, that's always fun. Great use of all of the Soviet core units, really. The ML-20 also made it up to 45 kills. Pretty impressive. The Stuka was also Vet 3 and made it to 32 kills, so artillery on Semoskiy always performs well. This game was no exception to that rule. Good game. Allies win.